teenager in high school, and I was definitely testing out my boundaries, so to speak. I would have nights when I would sneak out of the house, just because I wanted to go hang out, especially with the older kids who are, 18 and who, were able to drive. And so my dad caught me a few times and gave me a stern warning. Don't let it happen again, because I don't know where you are. I don't even know that you're out. I think that you're sleeping. If something were to happen to you, I wouldn't even know that you weren't home. And it worries me. And, you're a female. And sorry to say, but it concerns me more because you're a female. And I said, oh, yeah, whatever. And, I did it again. And the funny thing is, when we would sneak out, we would go karaoke or something. We weren't doing anything terrible. I think it was just the fact of being out late. There was some sort of allure to that. And so it happened again. And, I knew this was when my dad caught me. When I came home and the lights were on in the house, oh yeah, my heart sank right into my stomach, and I was contemplating running away. So when I got home, my dad was understandably furious. I think he felt like he just didn't know what to do. He had spoken to me many times. He had given me final warnings. My dad was very scary. He had always been the one that my brother and I feared. So we didn't really go against his wishes very often. And so he told me to go up to my room. I went up to my room, and he brought a stick and he hit me behind my calves. And needless to say, I never did it again, and it was painful. And he left, and my mom came in, and my mom was very upset, and she, put ice on my legs, and she was, why did you do that? You knew that this was gonna happen. Why did you do that? Dad's so upset with you. And I could tell that my dad, felt bad, because the next morning he made me breakfast and he took me to school, and I can tell that he felt bad, right? But he did what he felt like he needed to do to get me to stop going out without his permission. And so I went to school that day, and we had gym class. For gym, we have a uniform, t-shirt, and shorts. So I changed into my uniform and not thinking anything. And a teacher, my gym teacher, reported to the counselor that I had bruises on my legs. And I didn't know any of that was happening. I got called into my counselor's office later that afternoon, and he said, your gym teacher had said that she saw bruises on your legs. Can you explain them? Can you show them to me? So I told him what had happened. I didn't think that there was any reason for me to hide the truth. I didn't think that there was any reason for me to lie. I told him exactly what happened, and I said, oh, it's okay. I'm never going to do it again. It's not going to happen again. And he said, yeah, we're going to make sure it never happens again. And that's when I realized this is going in a different direction than what I had meant. I could tell from the intonation of his voice that he was feeling like he had to protect me from my dad, right? Because he kept saying, don't worry, I'm going to make sure this never happens to you again. And I said, no, it didn't happen to me. I did it to myself. And he had called the police department. So they were there. They came to the school. They said, we're going to take you home, and we're going to have to place your dad under arrest. And so they took me home. My brother was home. My mom and dad were there. And I had to walk in with them and then see them then arrest my dad, who had basically no idea what was going on. He saw the police come, and he was worried that something had happened to me. And, and then he realized that he was the one getting arrested. So they took him. My brother was there. My brother was very young. He was about 8 years old. And they took him away. I don't think he spent much time in jail. His attorney was able to get him out on bail, but we were taken from the house immediately. They told us to pack some stuff. They took us away. Child Protective Services were there. They put us in some sort of temporary shelter for kids, which was, I mean, the walls were gray. It was it just felt like a cinder block room with a few toys and a small table. So my brother and I spent some time there. We slept on these cots, these uncomfortable cots. And then they were trying to figure out where to place us. So we eventually went to my mom's cousin's house. They lived a few towns over and they agreed to take us in. My mom begged to have us stay there. So we went there. My mom was able to pick us up every day and take us to school and bring us back there, but we were not allowed to go home. We were not allowed to see my dad. And the only time we were able to see my dad was during counseling sessions. We spent a full year that way. And it was tough because my brother was so young. My brother would ask me a lot of questions. Why are we not allowed to go home? What happened? Why did the policeman take dad? You know, why is mom crying all the time? Because my mom was always crying when she would drop us off and she would have to go back to the house, and she was basically, you know, she would have to go back to the house with my dad. And, you know, my dad and my mom never had a great relationship. And I'm pretty sure my dad was not the most pleasant person to be with, you know. And so she was always crying. And so my brother would ask me, why is mom crying? You know, what's going on? When can we go back home? Why can't we see dad? And he was always full of questions. And there were difficult questions for me to answer because I didn't quite fully understand myself. I couldn't quite grasp exactly what the legal system was, what was going on, right? And so we would go to these counseling sessions, and that was like the only time I would be able to see my dad. And it was very uncomfortable for a long time because I felt like he hated me because I did this to him, you know, because, you know, this whole thing started with me going to school and being discovered, or why didn't I lie for him? Why didn't I say, you know, I was playing or I was doing something and something else happened to me, right? And although, you know, I know that it's not my fault, but I couldn't help at that time feeling that because of my actions or my lack of, you know, my inability, that I kind of perpetrated this and I made it worse. And so the counseling sessions were very hard. I could never look at my dad in the face. I was always seated very far from him. And also it became a child abuse case. And it was not a child abuse case. My dad had never been abusive to me ever. He was always very physically affectionate to me. He was always, you know, he was strict. He had very strict rules and we knew to follow them. But being strict does not elevate you to child abuse. And so for me, it was tough because they were basically calling my dad a criminal. And even in these counseling sessions, they were trying to counsel him out of being a child abuser. But you can't do that to someone that's not abusing kids. My dad actually loved kids. He loved kids. And all my friends used to come over because he would give them all money, you know? So those sessions were ineffective. I felt like they were ineffective. They had no understanding for culture. There was no room for cultural awareness, and that was a big fault. And it's a big weakness in that system. And so we had that, you know, counseling sessions for a year, once a month. And then after that was done, we were allowed to go back home. Then they said, you know, my dad was, you know, recovered or whatever it was. He had successfully completed the program and we were able to go back home. But, you know, even when we were back home, it was definitely a different environment. It wasn't the same. You know, something had definitely changed in a way that was irreversible. It was a permanent change. And something in my dad had changed too. His personality had changed for sure. I think that for him it was very difficult, right? Because it became almost like, well, part of him felt embarrassed that he had to go through the legal system in that way. And he felt sort of disgraced. And I know he felt, just a little, just shamed, right? And he also probably felt very angry that he was being punished by the law for something that he thought he was doing for the benefit of his children. And so, it was very difficult. I think, well, after that point, my dad was definitely less physically affectionate with us. And I think that was just part of him, like, being anxious and just sort of afraid, afraid to have any kind of physicality with us because it may be misinterpreted. And I think he felt like everybody was always watching him because, we lived in a very small town. Already, like, everybody on the block knew about it, right? Because there was police activity and, the court is very small and everybody sort of knows each other. It's a very tight town. And I think he just felt embarrassed and he didn't want to be seen putting his hands on me or my brother and have somebody report him, God forbid. Or, I just think he felt like he was marked. And he was marked in that society, at least in our small community, he was marked as this criminal or as this, like, child abuser, as a bad person. And he just didn't want any room for misinterpretation, right? But because of that, he removed himself from being the person that we knew him to be. And so that caused that permanent change in him, for the worse, I think. And that was unfortunate. And my mom became more skittish around my dad, and it just kind of changed the whole dynamic of our family. And I think that's why it was just around that time my dad took a position that sent him overseas often. And I think that had something to do with his decision of wanting to travel more for work and sort of wanting to be outside the house more. I think that was more comfortable for him to be outside. And so he started traveling more often at that point. It just felt like in our context, it was a little bit thrown out of perspective. And I guess my problem was that nobody had even stopped to try to understand. Right. Well, okay, what is that perspective, right? Let's try to see what happened and try to take an unbiased view of it instead of just jumping on what it is that you think happened. I tried telling them my dad felt bad. I know he felt bad. I could feel that he felt bad. It wasn't that he was, rejoicing over the fact that he hurt his daughter, But
they don't trust your judgment.
No, I was impaired. I was a victim of abuse, and whatever I said came out skewed anyway. But it was actually that time in my life that I had made me want to go to law school, because I had such a fear of the police and I had such a fear of the court system, of the legal system, because I didn't know it. It was foreign to me. I had no idea what the laws were. I had no idea how the court system works. I had no idea, like, when somebody goes to jail, somebody gets arrested, what happens to them? What's the process for them? That all of that was foreign to me, and I think it was frightening because I didn't know. I didn't know what was going on with my dad when they had taken him. Where is he? What is he going through? What's happening to him? Does he get locked up or does he go to court? I had no idea. And so I think all of that was very scary and intimidating. And I had decided after that point that I didn't want to be intimidated by those things anymore. So if that happens ever again, that I would be much more knowledgeable and I'd be able to understand what was going on, and I wouldn't be scared of them. I wouldn't be scared of law enforcement, and I wouldn't be scared of people that are part of the legal system. And that's actually why I decided to go to law school, is because I wanted to feel more empowered, right? I never went to law school because I wanted to become a lawyer. I went to law school because I just wanted to have that bank of knowledge, and I wanted to feel stronger. That if that ever happened to somebody that I care about or to myself, I'd actually have some basis to be able to stand up and say, hey, this is not right, and these are the reasons why it's not right, and to be able to understand that whole process and the laws behind it. Mm-hmm. And so yeah, so that's why I decided that whole event in my life actually brought me to going to law school.